All right, we got 5. You ready?
Sure.
5 o'clock.
All right, everybody, we got 5 o'clock. Let's get started. So I'll call the Village Board of Oregon for Monday, October 3rd, 2022 to order. Candy, if you would do the honors, please.
Yes. Beshin,
Here.
Belo,
Here.
Glish,
Here?
Jacobson,
Here.
Peterson, Wunsch,
Here.
and Van Kampen is absent. And Amanda's going to be a few minutes late, she said.
Okay. So I've been asked if it's okay with the rest of the trustees if we move up Village Board comments, 10C. Derek has something to share, and then also Carlene. Are we okay with that, everybody?
Sure.
Okay, all right. So let's do that. We'll do 10C, which is Village Board comments. And Derek, if you'd like to.
Sure. So in regards to our last meeting, discussing the village logo proposal, at the advice of Trustee Van Kampen, I've decided to withdraw my questions. I will not be seeking confirmation nor clarification of the comments in reference to our last meeting. And going forward, I will also not be participating in any discussion involving the new village logo and will abstain from any votes regarding orange whip design. That's it.
Okay, all right. Derek, thank you. Carlene.
I just wanted to share that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee did make the decision, which I think I'd shared previously, to go with the Nehemiah proposal for the training for village employees and village staff and employees and board members and committee members. Just wanted to let you know that we had a really good discussion with Harry Hawkins from Nehemiah at our last meeting, and we will be talking about it again at our meeting on Thursday and designating some folks from the committee along with Martin to meet with them to design what the training will look like. So just wanted to keep you abreast of that. I don't have any real news on what that will look like, but just wanted you to know those things.
Okay, and welcome back, Carlene.
Yes, thank you.
Any?
I did, by the way, attend library board and DEI meetings while I was gone.
Okay. Anybody else on the board have comments? Okay, seeing none. Let's go back up then to number 3 is approval of September 19th, 2022 Village Board meeting minutes. I'll take a motion in a second. I see Derek and Jenna. Any discussion on those from anybody? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you.
Abstaining.
Okay, Mike is abstaining, he wasn't here, and Carlene, okay. All right.
Then we only have
There's
3.
not a quorum.
There's not a
Oh, we
quorum.
can't have a quorum, so I guess we'll have to do it next time.
Or you can-
We can wait till Amanda
Okay.
can come back to it. Okay. All right, let's go to 4, which is public appearances, comments, and communication. Public comment, this part of the agenda allows members of the public to provide information to the village board, including items both on and off the agenda. Members have 3 minutes. So I think we have a couple. Who wants to be first? Is it Bob? Is that right? No? Oh, you're not here for public comment?
No.
Okay.
Not at this, I was under the assumption Martin was gonna put something in for us.
This is the Historical Society, right? The Historical Society?
For the historical.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, so there's a document in your packet under this item related to the Historical Society requesting to be on a future agenda to talk about 249 North Main Street.
Okay. All right, Ray, do you want to, well, so let me tell the rest of, one thing that has sort of come to me, has come up, is whether or not we should be having presentations for like North Main that we haven't even decided yet on the project. We haven't even decided on what we're going to do with that. But also in reference to other projects, there's a norm, sort of this, we have a process where people go through the plan commission, all that sort of stuff. And it seems a little unusual that people are coming to the village board. Usually we get the stuff last. So I just want to ask, because it does seem unusual that we're having presentations when certain things haven't been decided yet. So I guess I'm just opening up for comment. Jenna?
I think since we just talked about the Historical Society's proposal, we should hear Ray's proposal and then have this discussion.
Okay, we could do that. All right, Ray, come on up.
So thank you for listening to me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Ray Vogler. I live at 299 North Main Street, right downtown in Oregon. And I had sent on behalf of the Friends of the Oregon Sculpture Garden a request for an agenda item that we hoped to actually to be on this meeting, but we must have missed the deadline. So we're requesting that for the next meeting. And the request that we put through email, and I'm just reiterating that request now, is a presentation of Oregon Sculpture Garden Park preliminary. So it's a preliminary design plan for 249-267 North Main Street. And the reason we think this is very important to have before decisions are made is that we've been asked by the board, by trustees, by the community, by citizens in the street, just saying, well, what is your idea? We know you want to have this, park there, but what are you really thinking? So right now we have a professional architecture firm. They do architecture of buildings all across the country. They have 28 locations. They're very professional, one in Madison, one in Milwaukee, and then one of their subdivisions is landscape architecture. So what they did is walk the lot with us for a good several hours and took into account our ideas and also ideas of citizens. So just so you know, what we've been doing is gathering citizen input, artists, people who do like produce carts, people who are interested in books or education or playing on play swings or anything like that. We've been getting a lot of input, and then we took that information and then we presented it to them. So they right now have done up a plan that I think will help you decide more about how serious we are, and we're very serious. And I know that one of the trustees said, well, I would like to take this more seriously if you address the issue of water runoff flooding. And these people have expertise in that field. They've done parks, believe it or not, for like the Bush family and all sorts of structures for universities and so on and so forth. And they do know how to address that issue in terms of drainage. So that could be done by the park. So we're just doing this as an informational presentation. And the idea is this, so you have a better idea of what we're trying to accomplish and what kind of structures we're talking about and permeable spaces and also finances. How do we plan to finance the park? I know that's been a really big question. We heard that from the get-go. And we have a lot of good ideas. We have actually a lot of work that's being done. There's incredible emotion in the community. People want this, and they're already making pledges based on if we do get this land, grant proposals and so on. So anyways, I don't think it's putting the cart before the horse, because this is something we've been asked from the very beginning. And we've just been waiting for someone with a real professional background in this area to do the plans. And even though we gave them ideas, they have their own ideas. So we're going with ideas that they are suggesting based on their many, many years of experience. So I think you'll find it very fruitful. I think it'll help you to make a decision about how serious we are. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Jenna, you want to start?
Oh, no, I wouldn't. Now I think
We should
you wanna
have
talk
a-
about your comments.
So I also talked to Martin too. This it's kind of a little highly unlikely that we typically have presentations before it even goes through the process. Correct, Martin? I mean, typically, people have a proposal and they have to go through the plan commission and all that sort of thing. So I want to bring it up and see where people are at. We haven't decided yet what we're going to do with North Main. I think once that's decided, then it would seem, then it would start the process of Plan Commission, Parks, whatever.
Randy?
Yes.
Just a point of information, we are planning at our next meeting to have the consultants from Vanderwall share their report about their findings from the community and the summary of the workshop and their due diligence on the site for 249 North Main. So just for kind of planning purposes, that will be on your next agenda on the 17th as well.
Okay. So what do we think? Derek?
I can definitely see your point as far as allowing people to speak before we even decided what we want to do with the property. However, I guess with the Historical Society in particular, we've already allowed the sculpture park presentation before us last winter. Just in interest of fairness, I don't think it would be necessarily right to allow one nonprofit to make a presentation and then not allow another nonprofit to make a presentation as well. If they have something they want to put together, I think it would do a disservice to the community not to at least listen to what they have to say. So I'd be in favor of allowing a proposal to at least come forward.
Okay. And I'm not trying to focus on North Main. I'm just saying any proposals that I don't know that since I've been on the board, that has happened before, that people with ideas have come to the board and talked about their projects. But that's just, Carlene, looks like you want to say something.
Yeah, so this is like the first time that I've been through this from, any parcel of land that the village is owned and trying to decide what to do with it. And there seem to be lots and lots of feelings about how to, and ideas about what should happen with that parcel. And it's clearly been tossed around for years. I don't know how long the village has actually owned that property. I know you put that together, Martin, but I didn't memorize that. It seems to me that Vanderwall has done what we asked them to do and will give us a report next meeting, correct?
Mhm.
And the Sculpture Park and Friends of the Sculpture Park have presented a couple of times now. Is that correct? Or just once? Just once. And then the Historical Society, I agree with Derek, has not had that opportunity. I guess I'm hopeful that we don't make any decision next week, that we hear from Vanderwall and or next meeting, sorry. We hear from Vanderwall about what the community at large has, how they've weighed in, hear from the Historical Society. And it seems to me that the decision we're making is whether to turn this into a park of some kind or sell it, or sell part of it or whatever. But that's the first decision before what happens next. And this is more a point of clarification for me, so I understand exactly what it is that we're doing. So it doesn't seem to me that the Plan Commission would be involved until that piece is made, that decision's made, and then it would go to the Plan Commission and they would hear proposals. Or is that?
No, what I was saying, Carlene, is typically when a developer or somebody comes in, it goes through the Plan Commission, and usually it gets to us when it's been through the whole process.
Right, but this isn't a developer coming in.
Well,
This is a property that we own that we're asking village residents what they want to do with it.
But it is a proposal. It is a proposal from the group.
No, this is not a proposal. Maybe we have some miscommunication. This is a high level. This is very much a high-level preliminary plan. It's not a proposal saying that we're expecting you to make a decision on that. What this is people wanted to have something to look at, to envision, because all along we've been talking about what we had in mind, right? And a lot of people could not envision that, so then we put some photos together, which we never brought to the board. Since that time, we showed photos of ideas. So we're not expecting to bring in a proposal that you'll be making a decision about. What we're expecting to do is to bring in a very high-level master plan to give you a concept of how something like this might pan out or look. And it's not where we're saying we're going to dot every I and cross every T. But I would think that if you didn't get this information, you would not be as better informed of what we are willing to do to participate. Because we said in the very, very beginning, now that would have been April, that we're going to put in sweat equity, we pledges, we have all this financial backing, and people don't know that. I mean, you don't know any of that. And I think that's something that you need to know when going to the next step, right? Because we do know money's an issue for some people. So this, no, we're not bringing in.
All right, Ray, I got it.
And
Thank you.
I wanted to add one more thing. The splash pad, I know they came in and they showed what they were doing to the board. And that was my understanding for you to also, same concept, envision what they were trying to do.
Okay, thank you.
So my point of clarification, what I want to understand is that, do we as the board make a decision first about whether it's going to be park or sold or whatever, and then the plan commission hears the proposals? Or, I mean, because this seems highly unusual as far as the way, because it's a property that the village owns. That's my, and so I guess that's really a question for you, Elise.
Well, partially depends on what you as the board, what information you want to have, I guess, before you make a decision. So, you know, typically land that's vacant is, you know, shown in our comprehensive plan in one particular way, and then it's either, you know, for sale or it's not, or somebody approaches us, and then we go through the standard process of the planning commission. So, you know, you could hear the comments from Vanderwall, hear that that summary from the community feedback. You certainly don't have to make a decision at the next meeting, and just sit with that information. I guess, you know, there have been, you know, you all have presentations from the youth center, from the Friends of the Badfish Creek, you know, those different groups. I guess it just depends on, do you see this as you know, information presented by a community group about an idea that they have, or do you see this as, this is a proposal for a very particular project on that piece of land? Again, not anything you have to make a decision on, it's just more what information do you want to have before you are giving, you know, staff direction to proceed with listing the land for sale or making a change to our zoning map or comprehensive plan.
And another question, is it most often the things that go to the plan commission about land that is privately owned, not owned by the village?
Right.
See, I mean,
right,
I feel like
typically
that's
we're
the
not
piece
selling
in this that makes it a little different than
Right.
it would be otherwise.
Typically the village isn't selling a lot of our land. We're usually holding onto it for a village purpose. So
Right,
this
okay.
is a unique circumstance.
That was very helpful, thank you.
Yeah, Jenna.
Elise and Jeff, could you all refresh my memory? I feel like when we were discussing the old motel property, we, at that point, before selling it, also had a developer come with their idea to help us decide if we wanted to sell it to that person and that particular project and that idea before it then went to plan commission. Am I remembering that correctly, or is that
Well,
not
yeah, I mean,
quite
in
correct?
that situation, we had acquired the property because long-term, we wanted to be able to have some say and control over what was gonna be put out on that property. And we only acquired this weird shaped piece, knowing that it kinda went with the other shaped piece. It actually worked out, you know, the developers came together, the developer bought both property from us and from them, or from the other party, and combined them and built on them. So it's kinda similar, but we never went out and asked for concepts of what people want to see there and everything like that. It was just, I think, a move at the time to be able to, you know, look into the future and see what we could do with that property.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the one thing I know, Martin has shared, the 17th looks like it's pretty full already, so it would have to be,
Well, we have the budget obviously going on. We'll have Carlson Detman here for the compensation study, and we'll have Vanderwall here for 249 North Main.
okay, so it might have to be the one after that. Martin?
It's up to you guys.
Okay. Yep. Amanda?
This is procedural too, just, when the results of the survey are presented, is that going to be a discussion item the first time we see it, and then action item following meeting, or is it gonna be discussion and action when we get presented with it?
I would default to putting it on as discussion and action, but if you have a preference, then we can do it however the board wants to do it.
Cause it would make sense to me that we can see proposals and get all of that and kind of think about it all and then make a decision after that. So that was my concern. I don't want us to make a decision at the next meeting without having the opportunity to hear from various groups.
Yeah, and that's sort of what I was saying before as well.
Right. I think it's also important to remember that while we have received a couple of proposals and particular ideas from groups in the community, those aren't necessarily the only options, and there are probably a lot of other, whether they're community groups or developers or maybe, just village goals to keep in mind. So I think, just keeping in mind that it's not a choice just between, two things in front of you, but there's a whole array of options. I think the information that you'll see from Vanderwall will do a good job kind of exploring community, thoughts and opinions, and some of the analysis that was done at that workshop about what are some of the strengths and challenges of this site. And, it might be something we need to sit with for a little while and explore further. It might not be the end of the exploration before we figure out what's the next step.
All right, so where are we? You want,
Yeah, I think this is just, I'd like to have, the information of the people who are ready to come forward or want to talk about these things before we, have something as an action item to make a decision on that property.
so do we want, do we want Elise to reach out there? She said there's potentially other people too, to be fair.
I guess in my ideal world, I would think it would be best if we looked at kind of the report from Vanderwall first to see what direction generally that provides, and then perhaps the path forward would be clear about, well, it really seems like the community wants this for more of a public type use, whether that's recreation, whether that's a building that serves the community in some way. So let's put out a call to organizations that might fit that bill before just kind of, again, putting out an open invitation and not really knowing if that information is going to be useful. If we hear from the community, everybody wants to see duplexes or something like that, just as an example. So I think
So just, let's see what the report says and go from there. Mike?
I really think it's a mistake for the village board to not listen to community groups when they come forward and want to present something to us. We may not agree with them. In full disclosure, that's my wife over there, just so you know. We may not agree with them. We might agree with them, but having a village board that point blank goes and says, yeah, we have community groups and we're not interested in hearing from you until we've made our decision, is a bad way to go, and it will engender a lot of hurt feelings and animosity towards the board, and I don't think we want to go down that road. So we have spent more time today discussing whether or not to have a presentation from two groups that, when they both present, would probably be significantly less time than this discussion's taken up. I personally will vote for community groups in general. If you got a community group and you want to come talk to the village board, I will vote for you to have a voice.
Yep, Jenna?
I thought we were discussing the timing of the presentations, not whether to have them. I guess I'm potentially misunderstanding that, and I apologize, but, if that's the case, but I thought we were trying to decide if we were gonna have the presentations at the same time as the Vanderwall and Associates presentation, or after. That was my takeaway. Not that they shouldn't present, but the timing of it. Because I agree with you, Mike, that we should be hearing all voices, right? That's why we have a listening session. I'm sure like you, or like me, your inbox has been flooded with emails on the particular topic. And so I think it's, from my perspective, more of how are we gonna get all this information presented, and then make sure that we're taking enough time to absorb the information so that we can make a thoughtful decision, right? Getting that information and then making a decision on the same day, especially with a decision that has so much passion on so many different sides, doesn't seem like the best move when we can take our time to make sure we're really thinking through the options that were presented, I guess.
Maybe I misunderstood.
No, maybe I did too. I just wanted to make sure, because that's what I was thinking when I was hearing like,
Yeah,
these two talking about here, this, and that.
All right, so let me sort of clarify. So I think we're all in agreement that we should find out what the Vanderwall's got to say, right, next time. And then anybody who wants to come and present an idea after that. I mean, I wasn't saying, Mike, that we're cutting off people.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
that's not what I sort of meant, yeah. So anybody who wants to come and present an idea or whatever for that site, they certainly can do that. But are we in agreement next time? Let's get the results and see what they report to us.
As long as we're not making any decisions on it
Yeah.
next time, then
Right.
that would allow
Yep.
groups to come the following week.
Yeah,
and
whatever,
present. For
yeah.
example, if we're worried about a crowded agenda, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Does that sound fair to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, Mike?
So then we can tell the two groups that are here that they can present the first meeting in November, so they can plan?
Well, we'll have to look at the agenda. I don't know what the agenda's like. Is that,
It would be November 14th, since the 7th will be the day before the election. At this stage, I don't know of anything for that agenda, so.
okay? Sound good?
That works for me.
Okay, all right. Sounds like we have a plan then. Good. Okay. Was there anybody else wanting to, because we're, for public comment? Okay. All right, can we go to 5? Let's go to approval of vouchers in the amount of $454,291.28. If I can get a motion, a second, we'll get it on the table. Mike and Carleen, anybody have any questions as you went through it? Not seeing any. Okay. All in favor? Oh, that's right. Sorry, Candy, we got to do a voice vote.
Wunsch,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
Philo,
Yes.
Glish,
Yes.
Beshin,
Yes.
and Jacobson.
Yes.
And just as a friendly reminder, don't forget about the minutes.
Oh, yes, thank you. Let's go up to 3 and,
Well, you gotta.
oh, wait, we can't do the minutes. We got to do them next time. Oh, no, we
Nope.
can do them now.
gotta-
Amanda's here.
you gotta-
Amanda, we had to wait until you got here. We didn't have quorum. So let's go back up to 3. Let's do approval of September 19th, 2022 Village Board meeting minutes. I'll take Amanda in a second. Who's got a second for me? Carleen?
But
Okay.
I was not at that meeting, though. That's,
Yeah.
Oh,
Still
boy.
on
for
that
the
quorum.
record.
Another
I mean,
problem.
To wait for Phil.
I watched it on YouTube.
Where's Phil?
I could bear witness.
I
but
mean, you can technically approve minutes. They're without being at the meeting, but that's up to your.
Well, she did
Discretion.
watch them, she said. so.
I did watch
All right,
it.
good.
That's
That
okay.
I
works.
thought they were accurate, but,
Yep.
Okay.
So I have motion by Peterson, second by Jacobson.
okay.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right, my favorite part of the agenda. Consent agenda. A through D. So I'll take a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in our packet. All right, Jenna, thank you, and Amanda. All right. Any discussion? I don't think. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
There's just one typo.
There was, okay.
Yeah, it's not pain, it's paint.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
Yeah. I saw that too.
Got it, Candy?
Paint striping.
Yeah.
Okay.
It did not sound pleasant.
But most days it is pain.
All right, then we can go to 7, report of committees. 7A is the library board, meeting minutes, August 10th, 2022. Library board meeting was in our packet, informational only, so no action required. We can go to 8, and I think 8A has been taken off the agenda, correct?
Yeah, so Jamie Bush reached out to us after this was published. He's got a couple items within the draft agreement that he wants to talk with us about. And we have a meeting with him this week. So we don't want to approve that right now. We just want to table it and see what comes of those discussions.
Okay.
So,
You want a motion to table? or-
and to what date?
We don't.
I don't think we don't
Okay.
need
We
to
just won't
table.
act on it.
All right.
We'll just bring it
All right.
back.
We just want to act on it, okay. All right, we can go to,
Derek has-
oh, yeah, Derek?
Can I ask, can we just take a quick 5-minute break?
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay.
My apologies for being late, everyone. I had an appointment that ran long, unavoidable.
You're excused, Amanda.
Yes, she's coming in Friday. And perhaps she's doing great.
Yes.
She got a long list of people to go meet. Not to mention you all, Shepherd and her team, so just through the whole village. So hey, getting all these people and.
It's all routine.
Okay.
And this is everything they're saying.
Thanks for that, Randy.
All right, you ready? Okay, I think we're back already. All right. So we're on to 8B is the continued review of organizational logo concepts.
I know.
Martin, do you want to say anything about these? So there were a couple comments from last time. These have not been updated, is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, all right, Elise will take it.
Yep, so I'll just give a quick overview for those who weren't here last meeting, but reminder, we had Orange Whip start this summer on some updates to our logo. This is in preparation for our move to Alpine Parkway, so we can have a nice big sign up there that looks like it's part of the 21st century, and some updated letterhead, business cards, all that stuff. So he gave us a few options in the initial round. I think there were maybe 11 concepts in this one that was sent to us in July. The department heads looked at this at a few meetings. We gave some feedback that we liked the various Tin Man concepts. We thought it was a little bit more unique to Oregon than just some of the various O designs, and we liked some of the fonts from some of the O designs to kind of combine maybe some different options. So, Jeff, maybe you can just slowly scroll through all of these, and they were all in the packet. They were here last time too, so no changes to what we included in the last packet. And then in August, he sent us concepts 12 through 15. So a few different options. There's also 2 different color oranges, which was discussed. That could be just changed to one color very easily. But different plays on the the Tin Man design and some incorporated into some of the O's and
If you stare at this one, cross your eyes, a space shuttle comes out.
yeah, it starts flying at you. So I don't think Jeff has this in the packet, but Bob Head did do a little
I
just
do.
summary of the.
Oh.
Was that on there? This one of
Oh,
just
no,
everybody's
no.
feedback. But with everybody here tonight, I just wanted to get some direction if there's particular design or designs that you all feel drawn to. And then there was, I know some comments last meeting that perhaps having this, oh yeah, there were some that were out on so what that would look like on the sign, on the coffee mug, t-shirt, etc. If there's maybe a few, maybe 2 to 4 options that you all can narrow it down to, we could certainly do a easy Google survey or SurveyMonkey or something, put that up on the Village Facebook page, up on our website for a few weeks and then get some feedback. We're not in a huge rush to get this done, but with moving in this springtime, we want to make sure we have enough lead time to get our sign made and up and things like that. Where I'll leave it, happy to answer any questions.
All right, questions? So one thing I'll point out that I didn't get it, so maybe some of you got it. The On Wisconsin piece, some of the logos, that's why if you, toward the back, the On is a different orange than.
Yeah,
I-
yeah, they mentioned that.
That was just over my head. I didn't get that when I first looked at it, but.
Yeah, I think we determined that might be over other people's heads too, so we can keep it simple with just the one color orange.
Yeah, and I remember, Jenna, you liked a certain font. Was it?
I like,
One
yeah,
name?
I like the concept, the first concept's font.
Yeah,
But I like the one Jeff mentioned was if you stared at it long enough and be in a starfish. That's the
Yeah.
one I like.
What?
I mean, I like all of them, but if I
The
had to choose,
the
that would
dots,
be-
the one that you need.
yeah,
Oh, you like that one?
yeah.
But
People
the
that would hear their
three-dimensional.
comments are in the minutes.
Yeah,
Oh, which
actually
one's
let
that?
me.
Oh,
I think it's really helpful being able to see these on the mug and the sign and the shirt.
Yeah.
To visualize what they would be like. And the one with the guy that's doing that just has the Tin Man, that one? No, keep going. That one. I actually think that would be kind of cool with the Village of Oregon in the black around the circle rather than underneath. And I like that one. I like that other O though, with the crescent O.
Elise, is that the one that had the homage to the terrace chairs with the rays?
Yeah. The terrace stairs is kind of behind
Yeah.
the one that you
sunburst, yeah.
It's kind of a sunburst behind the.
Behind
behind
the Tin Man.
Oh,
Be
I figured
cool.
that was our
That too.
lighting on the Tin Man.
yeah.
And like if Village of Oregon was in that black circle on the shirt.
Like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Not so much on where it also says it, but, because otherwise it doesn't identify Village of Oregon on this, just the shirt logo.
No.
I've got to say, I agree with Jenna.
Okay.
I
so
like
then
your logo and I like the font.
You just know.
Just in, I just
Hold on.
received an email from.
Spaceship one?
This is just summarizing. I think Randy, Jenna, and Phil gave some feedback last time too, so he did put together just a kind of
Oh.
side by side of what folks' feedback was. So if you wanted to see at least from the folks that were here last week that gave some feedback,
Yeah.
what you guys were liking. So Jenna, I think he took your block letters and put it next to some of those different options. It's like Randy
That's
and
cool.
Phil liked the first Tin Man. So like I said, I think maybe something in the 2 to 4, 2 to 5 range would be a good number of choices to, if you wanted to put something out to the community, we could work on getting that set up.
I like having the Tin Man in it just because it's been equated with Oregon and it is something you see when you come here.
I think one of the things, whatever you do, consider I like the idea where you have one that's more of a square block. And when we went through like getting the shirts done through the uniform
Mhm.
company, real long lettering doesn't really come out
Right.
well. And so, you know, where you have a situation where it has both kind of a block, kind of a stacked logo, that'll fit well on our sign. We really don't want to modify the side out there.
Mhm.
But longer like this, where you then move it over to the side, fits really nicely on letterhead and business cards.
So we could do both, and just depending on the
Right.
application, it can be rearranged.
Yeah, like these are, or any of these are right here, or this too.
Yeah, I like how
I-
you have them laid out both ways, so we can see. Sorry.
I would feel better about that first option that you have there under Randy if we lost the orange behind the tower. It just looks really dark and
I disagree. I like the starburst behind it.
okay, nobody's going to agree here.
Well,
No,
I
nobody-
so I have a clarification. Do you want all of the orange? Because there's two shades of orange back there, one for the raise and for the chair. And oh wait,
Not
It's
now.
not on that
under-
Not on any of these,
I
yeah.
thought it was on the.
Yeah, it was on the other.
It's
Yeah,
I think that's
I
supposed to
can-
be concept 13, isn't it?
I can
It
go
is,
back
but
here,
you
like
like the
on this.
starburst in it.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
So do you want all? Are you thinking all the orange, or do you want the raise and not the background, or
I think
something
this
else?
is pretty cool.
Okay.
Just looks busy to me, but
You know what, Jeff, I agree with you. I mean, since it's lit, it kind of does look like lighting it up in a way.
Yeah.
The best.
See, I like the other one with the rays. Well, it's
No,
still
no,
rays,
it's
but they're
okay.
not out in every direction. They're
Yeah.
like behind it, which I'm trying to figure out which one that was.
Here, let me
The
go
first
back.
one, maybe? No, the first one, the very first.
It's like you're going to the eye doctor, number one.
Like
number two.
here's the sun coming up, shining on it. That's what it looks like.
Oh.
Like the very first
Like
logo.
1A, yeah.
And I like that one too. That's probably
Yeah,
was
I
my
didn't notice
favorite.
that one.
That, I mean, if we're gonna pick one, that I think is a little less busy, cause it's not quite as many
Mhm.
lines. But,
No, sharp.
but I could see also, think about this, when you print things, like
Yeah.
a one color design versus a two color design, you know, price wise, if that's like a 3-color design, and, you know, you're talking about more cost associated too, whereas if it was a solid orange, it would be a two-color.
This
is
kind of,
Sorry.
blue. Sorry.
That is,
yeah,
that's
it's a
good.
screening. You could get that with 2 colors as well.
Oh, you can? Oh, I didn't know that.
So
Go
this-
ahead, Jeff.
This, blue-gray.
Take us home.
Kind of, well, no, this blue-gray kind of look, really will match well with the color scheme too, that's out in the new Village Hall. And
Oh,
it's also kind of a timeless color too. Usually blues and grays are good, but yeah, this is, don't you think, Candy, from what you've
Uh-huh.
seen on what we have?
Yeah.
Favorites.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say,
And-
sorry.
Or so, and I would say like with J.C. Park, one of the things you notice as we go through there, we've tried to keep a lot of, if you're driving by, orange, orange foul posts, and we want to kind of keep embracing, because Oregon is orange. I mean, we're not high school fields here, but it is kind of, go down bills, it's all orange or red, right?
Red?
So,
Or green and yellow.
Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes
I would
purple.
say, at this point, rather than kind of deciding how many oranges and what direction they're going, what would be most helpful is just general, what designs or shapes do you like? Is there enough of a direction that we have a couple of, just from the one that I just emailed you,
I'm on
a
it.
couple of options that people express if you want to add anything else to this list, and then if you want us to make a decision as department heads, we'll be happy to, pick our favorite, or we can put it out to the community.
I would add my vote in here. I like
Yeah.
a combination of 1A and 13. I like the 1A tower
Mm-hmm.
and the rest of 13, the font and everything.
That's 1A, and then 13. You said we're at the eye doctor here, with the font.
Yeah, I like that font.
And then curling all one color, right? Because this
You
has
mean
got
as far as the
two,
orange goes?
yeah, it's got two
Yeah.
colors, yeah,
That doesn't
For
matter
the
to me.
Oregon.
yeah.
I look at it and I see,
Yeah,
I
it's
just see
nice.
Charlie and Swoop.
All right, you have
I
some,
think I agree with Carleen.
yeah, I'm okay with Carlene's
I
thing
like-
too.
I am not making this.
Yeah, I-
No,
yeah.
I'm agreeing with you. I like the logo from 1A, and I'm okay with the font from 13. I don't have any, less of an opinion about that, but
All right, Lise, go for it.
So,
I-
do you want the department heads to come up with our final recommendation, or are we gonna put this out on the survey?
Well, I guess I have some questions. I
Yeah,
was
Jenna.
thinking about, so if we do a survey for the community, and we don't want too many, right? So maybe 2 or 4. Do you think you all have enough direction to work with, or to narrow it down to 2 or 4 from that?
I think so, yeah,
Okay.
based on what we got last week, and then, you know, Carlene's, that's Amanda's preference. Maybe I'll have him just put them all side by side, make sure they're kind of different enough, and then, we can, you know, if you want to see that before it goes out on a survey, we can. Otherwise, I think we have enough direction. We can get a few, I think probably end up with like 3 or 4 options.
I think staff should weigh in on the one that you
Yeah,
like
I do
best.
too.
yeah, I do too.
I would, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, I would push away from, I mean, I don't think this is something that has to necessarily go out to the public to, I mean, because then you, on Facebook, you can't really control who, I mean, we could have 45 people from the town voting on what they think, you know, Village of Oregon is. I think this is a fairly small deal. Actually, when we started this a while ago, we kind of thought, it's just a great opportunity to kind of freshen things. This wasn't really setting the direction for the next 50 years. I don't think we're designing policy for the next 50 years. We looked at it and we said, we're gonna have to have new cards made. We've always talked about how kind of out of date our logos are. Even when we came up with kind of the current logo, I think that was just something we kind of kicked around and generated.
I think we just did it.
I think it
I
was
was
made in
gonna say-
WordPress.
Yeah, cut and paste.
But I think
Did
this is
transfer
something
it.
that, you know, there are certain things, obviously, I mean, I think we definitely need public input on, but I think there's certain times where it's just like,
Yeah.
let's not hash the small
Right,
stuff.
like we talked about, it's not branding for the whole
Yeah.
community, like who we are as a village, this is
Right.
the village organization, what's our logo?
Well, and look at how much agreement we all had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Amanda.
Yeah, I was just gonna clarify too, so this, I totally agree, I don't think this needs to be, going out to the public decision, and I do want staff input, but, this is something we put on our signs, and
Yeah.
it would go on like business cards and letterhead,
Before it's tried.
but it's not gonna go on the side of our red trucks, right? Like our public works vehicles and things like that, it's not.
Why not?
Eventually, probably.
Not tomorrow.
Not tomorrow, no, not tomorrow.
Well,
and-
because then why are we doing orange? Because all our trucks are red.
Right, no, orange and red don't go very well. No, I mean, normally we would, in fact, we're actually talking about that a little bit. I shuddered to even mention this. But yeah, when we get our new water truck, we'll be putting some decaling on the side that'll just say Oregon Water Utility. But it probably will still just have our standard Public Works logo on that.
Right, which I like.
Right,
I think we should keep
exactly.
the Public
It's-
Works logo. I mean, so I'm just
Yeah.
trying to determine where this would go. So it would not,
This is going exactly
Replace
where you're
Public
seeing it
Works.
here, like this.
Okay.
I mean, this is our sign out at the new building, which I've always thought is a little weird looking, but it's fine.
That's what we have.
It's what we have, you know, and so it really fits well with a square motif. I think there are times where it's like fun to have, you know, some,
Jeff needs a new wardrobe.
I do need a new
Yeah.
wardrobe.
Yeah.
No offense, but no one knows what this is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but probably website eventually, letterhead, business cards, envelopes,
okay.
Mhm.
basic stuff.
And I'm good with that. I
Yeah.
think that's perfect. I don't think that's worthy of putting out to the public necessarily. Now, if we did a major rebranding of our town, absolutely, but.
Yeah.
I want one of these mugs.
All right, Jenna gets the last word.
Well, since this is not my last time, but I was thinking the T-shirt, so I'm a sucker for a graphic T-shirt, but I like that. So I guess I thought it might be a fun way to involve the community, you know, kind of lighthearted, like, hey, come vote for the new Village Hall logo. But I also understand that sometimes it might just be easier to just go ahead with it. So I'll defer to the majority on that one. But I do like the ideas of, you know, having staff work to narrow it down and kind of see with the feedback that's been given and kind of proceed forward. I think you'll do a good job.
You're the ones that have to look at it the most.
Right. Yeah.
So,
All right, sounds like you have direction from us.
Okay.
Good? Okay.
Yep.
All right, let's get to the big guns tonight, which is 9, new business. Items are for discussion, possible action. 9A is review 2023 draft budget. And Martin is going to start us off.
I feel like a magician.
I'm just gonna take control of the screen here.
Where's your rabbit?
You're good.
That's enough.
Hopefully it'll recognize him. Are you plugged in? Yep. There we go.
There we go.
Now we're on.
Alrighty, so I'm gonna talk for a while. So, the 2023 draft budget is in your packet. It's the full budget. It's all 218 pages. And if you remember last year, it's pretty similar to how I set it up last year. And we're gonna start and go through it. We'll start with the property tax levy limit, and we'll talk about some budgetary challenges that we're facing. And then if we get beyond that, we'll do a recap of the CIP, which we've covered for the last couple of months here, review some debt service budgets, which are straightforward, and then can get on to the general fund budgets as well. I have kind of the schedule in there of where we go from here. Obviously, we're still working on the budget to a certain degree, double checking and triple checking things. There's still a few unknowns out there that we need to get into calculations and all that sort of thing, so we'll work on that. Next meeting, as I mentioned, we'll have Carlson Denman here to talk about the compensation study. We'll continue our budget review, and we'll hit on the non-general fund stuff, which is all pretty straightforward, so we should be able to get through that. And then we'll decide if we're ready to move on and publish the public notice, or if we need additional meetings. And then that'll take us all the way up to the week of Thanksgiving, when we should be approving the budget. So for the budget, I like to kind of start at the end and talk about the property tax levy limit, because that's what people care about. So as everybody knows, we obviously have property tax levy limits in Wisconsin. They're the most restrictive limits in the nation. They've been in place for almost 20 years now. And we can only increase our property tax levy limit by something called net new construction, which is the value of new construction that occurred in the previous year. And so there's a calculation that's run that determines how much you can raise your taxes based upon that. So we cannot raise our taxes just however we want to. It has to be based upon that calculation. And more so than ever, maybe than previous years, it's important to note that we cannot increase levy based upon inflation. So it's only based upon that net new construction amount. So basically you have to be growing and constructing things in order to have your taxes go up. So there are certain exceptions to that. Most of them are uncommon. The most common one is debt service. So we can keep raising our taxes to cover our debt service payments all the way up to our debt service limit, which we've talked about at previous meetings with the CIP. So you can see here, this is what our levy limit looks like on the screen for 2023. Our net new construction value was slightly less than last year. So The allowable levy limit increase for our entire government operation is 133,000 this year. Last year was 161. So when you think about an operation that expends about $7 million, only having $133,000 to increase, especially in this environment, is very challenging. Debt service, again, we can levy as much as we need to cover those payments. Our debt service is obviously going up. We talked about that during the CIP process. Some of those payments related to the library debt service that we've taken on the last couple of years. The new Village Hall was another big one, and then JC Park was another big project that we took that out for. So those payments are starting to come online. You can see the total levy required for debt service is up about 26%, from 2.1 to 2.8 million this year. So all said, the total levy allowed is 8.4 million, which is 10% higher than last year. And the budget we're presenting here is all the way up to that 8.4. So another thing that's important to note that I have here with the levy limit is our equalized value, total value of all property and improvements in the village actually went up 12% this year, which is a really big jump. But that's not how we can raise taxes. We can't raise taxes based on increases to existing value. We can only raise taxes on new construction value. So when the existing value appreciates like that, it just spreads the tax levy around in a different way. In terms of the levy, the 8.4 million, you can see on the screen there where it's all going to. So in the different funds, so obviously the most of that is going to the general fund, which is all of our government operations. We have been trying to put some money towards our sick leave fund, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but we don't have anything in the budget for this year, at least in the draft. The library has about a 6% increase there for their levy contribution. And then on the debt service side, for our TIF districts, both TIF 3 and TIF 4 don't generate enough cash, enough increment to support all of their debt service payments. So the general fund, the general property tax levy, has to contribute some money to offset those costs, and you can see those contributions there. One piece of good news in this is TIF 5, which has turned around and is starting to cash flow really well. So it does not need a contribution from the general property tax levy any longer. And that one should stay consistent throughout the life of the TID unless something dramatic changes. So it's actually in the red right now, but it will reverse that and then actually start generating quite a bit of increment. So that's good news. And then you can see the general debt service property tax levy there again, 2.5, up 34% from the year prior.
Martin, do you want us to hold questions to the
No,
end? Or
please go ahead. Yeah.
I just had a question about TIF 3 and TIF 5 because they overlap.
Yep.
So when a business applies for one, we're applying it to TIF 5 as opposed to TIF 3. We're just going to
Yep.
take the loss on 3 because TIF 5 has longer period to repay. Is that
That's exactly
okay?
right. Yep.
All right. Just
Yeah,
clarifying.
the village overlaid TIF 5 over TIF 3 and did some additional land as well. But effectively, TIF 3 is kind of a defunct TIF at this point. It's will not generate enough value to pay off for the life of its TID. We'll get to a point where it'll pay off its debt service, and then we'll have to decide if we want it to repay the general fund or if we just want to close it at that point.
Okay.
So all the property tax levy then translates into a tax rate, of course. So the tax rate is based off of assessed value. We don't have the final numbers for assessed value quite yet, but if it follows the equalized value percentage increase, which is what I'm using here to estimate, we could be moving up to about 1.5 billion instead of 1.3. And actually, it has the effect of potentially creating a tax rate that is essentially flat, if not possibly going down a little bit. And that's, again, just because of the appreciation of existing value going so high that it's being spread across more value. But what that really does on a property, so for example, here you can see the average assessed single-family home in the village went from 341 last year to 406 this year. So you can see what that looks like when we run the tax rate through it. It's because the value increased. Even though the tax rate is lower, they're still getting an increase, and you can see that there, about a 16% increase, $333. So if your value went up, you will see an increase in taxes, even if that tax rate holds flat or slightly less. Now, if your value stayed about the same, or maybe went up just a little bit, you may see, you know, a flat tax rate, or maybe even a little bit going down. And again, this is just the village portion of taxes, so this doesn't include the school district, the county, the tech college, any of that. One thing I wanted to include in here to kind of give some perspective for our tax rate. So this page and this chart here shows all of the cities and villages in Dane County and the combined tax rates. So this does include the school district, the county, and the tech college, as well as the municipality. So you can see that the village is actually very low compared to other communities, cities and villages in Dane County, except for Rockdale for some reason. Those Rockdalians. So yeah, when we compare ourselves to some of these other communities, McFarland, Verona, you know, Cottage Grove, DeForest, Middleton, you know, they're all up here. I mean, just, you know, 5 minutes down the road in Brooklyn, a $400,000 valued home is almost $3,000 more in taxes just down in Brooklyn than compared to here in Oregon. So we've been historically low, but with taking on some of the debt service and some of the projects that we'll be taking on, we know that debt service tax levy amount is going to double over the next 5 years, and so we'll find ourselves probably towards the middle of the pack in a couple of years here. But you know, again, I think this is sort of a reflection of some of these communities have done their libraries, they've done their senior centers, they've done police stations, fire stations. They're on their 20-year notes and bonds for paying off those things. We're going to be getting into that now too, and so you'll see us start to rise more into the middle of the pack here. Is there any questions on taxes that I can answer before I get into the next part? All right, so I'm going to spend probably a little bit of time here. So if you read through this, this is a pretty sobering read. So I'll talk through all the things that I have in here, and then we can discuss or have questions. So if you remember back on September 12th, Dave Ferris came and presented the financial management plan. And if you recall, in the general fund part of that, he had showed rising expenditures against flat revenues. So what that means is there's going to be a deficit. There's going to be a gap that's eventually created if something isn't controlled on one side of the ledger. And so what he showed was within 5 years, if nothing changed, we would basically have to use our fund balance, our rainy day fund, to fund that deficit. And within 5 years' time, that fund balance would be gone, and essentially the general fund would be broke. So what's happening in this budget is it is balanced as it's presented, but we are there. We're year one of that model, and we are using general fund balance to balance this budget. So it's not something that's down the road. It's happening now, and it's no longer a projection. It's reality. So there's a few challenges that we can talk through here. There's obviously challenges on the revenue side, there's challenges on the expenditure side that I'll go through. There's also other types of challenges that are kind of on the not so distant horizon that we need to be thinking about in relation to all of this. Those challenges are the ones that I call the ones that I think about when I wake up at 3 a.m. So we'll go through some of these things just to kind of to demonstrate kind of the reality of where we're at right now. So we talked about the levy limit restriction. Again, you know, when we're in a world of 5 to 10% inflation, and our primary source of revenue, which represents 70% of our revenue for the general fund, it can only go up 2.5%. Again, the challenge is right there. The second highest source of revenue that we have is shared revenues from the state, and these are funds that the state gives us for general purpose revenues. Those have been flat for at least 10 years, if not more, maybe even going on 20 years now. So when 85% of your revenues are essentially flat, you know, that creates a serious challenge. These next two things are, you know, things that you really need to take note of, and it really you really need to think about very carefully. So expenditure restraint funds, this is a funds that we get from the state as well. It's a program that they have where if we, just like it sounds, if we restrain ourselves from expending a certain amount of money year to year, they give us a payment. We get a reward. And we achieve that this year. We don't always achieve it, and sometimes it's just the way that it works in terms of how your budgets pan out and what kind of consumer price index it is looking like. That's the variable that they use for that calculation. And in between 2011 and 2016, that variable was very, very low. And so, you know, it sometimes it just worked out that it didn't work, and you had to kind of work around that. It worked this year. We got it. We have $52,500. In past years, when we did achieve it, the village was able to get that out of the revenue, out of the general fund revenue, and put it into a capital fund so that we could use it for one-time expenses. So we didn't have to rely on it as operational revenue. Well, in order to balance the budget this year, we had to bring all of that money back into the general fund budget. And that's $52,500. So if we can't achieve that in a future year, that's going to blow a $52,000 hole in the budget. To a certain degree, we control that. I mean, we can always work our way back from expending dollars. But like I said, some years it just becomes very untenable. I think we'll get it in 2024. The CPI is crazy right now. It's like 9.7%. So I'm not too worried about getting it in 24, but you know, we'll see where we're at beyond that. Another thing that that's even more concerning than that, because we don't necessarily control this, is rental income that we receive from the post office. So we are receiving $70,000 in rent from the post office in 2023, and that lease goes until mid-2024, and at that point we expect that they will actually leave that site. So again, with the expenditure restraint funds, we had started moving chunks of this revenue out of the general fund, so we didn't have to rely on that as an ongoing operational revenue. We had to bring every dollar of that back into the general fund to balance the draft budget. And so this is something where this time next year we'll be down to $35,000, and then in 2 years we'll have none of it. So this will blow up to $70,000 in our budget that we'll need to find to fill. And then again, as I mentioned, if there's one thing I can get into people's heads here, is, you know, the red flag is here, the sirens are going off, everything is flashing on this one. We're using $23,500 to balance this budget of fund balance. So as I said, you know, that projection, that model that Dave showed us, where we're starting to use our rainy day fund, that is happening in this budget. And that is not a good place to be in. So all those things taken together, we're looking at $150,000, $170,000 that is unreliable, not sustainable. On the expenditure side, I think if you've been around the village and been involved with the village for these past few years, you know that exclusive of salaries and benefits, the operational budgets are restrained to bare minimum. I mean, they are down to the bone in terms of, supplies, fuel, vehicle costs, repair, maintenance. We've gotten them as low as we possibly can over these 20 years, especially when we're thinking about inflation and growth of the community. So the big challenges with expenditures, again, salaries is going to be the big one, and that takes up the bulk of what the general fund expenditures are. We have a 3% placeholder across the board in this budget. Of course, we have the compensation study that we're awaiting to get the results on. So we'll see what that looks like, and then we'll decide how we want to distribute the amount of money that we have in there under the 3%. If we want to try to do some adjustments based on the compensation study plus and across the board. But the reality is we're just going to be able to do what we can do within the budget that we have. And again, it's going to be a competition everywhere to increase salaries because of inflation. And if we're not trying to keep up, retention, recruitment problems, the downstream effect of not being able to keep and hire high quality employees, what effect that has on our services. And I think Lisa mentioned a couple months ago in a meeting, one of the things that the board has done when we've had budget crunches in years past is where we find the savings, is we just ratchet down the non-union increases until the budget works. So it was a 2% last year, it was a 1% the year before. So at some point we need to play catch up, and this compensation study will show us a plan to do that, and it might be a multi-year plan to do that. Employee benefits is similar to salaries. If we want to think about employee-friendly benefits or making modifications to benefits to kind of keep pace with what we're seeing in other communities and in the private sector, again, we need to find money to do that. And of course, all these other issues compounding that create challenges to do that. Again, if we don't have competitive benefits, it's a similar issues with salaries in terms of retention and recruitment. So again, that's something that we need to be thinking about. The 2023 budget doesn't contain any money for contingency. We normally have at least some in there. As I mentioned before, there's no money to go towards sick leave payouts. We have basically a legacy benefit that I don't know, something like 5 or 6 employees still qualify for, that pays out sick leave when they retire. That fund is $5,000 in the red, we think it'll be at by the end of this year. We estimate that we probably have a payout coming in 2028, give or take a year maybe, of $80,000 to $100,000. That fund has no money right now. If you go down this line, I'm sure you'll hear the need for additional positions because of obviously growth of the community and that sort of thing. I think Public Works for sure, police for sure. I know the library is interested in a position as well. At Village Hall will need a position at some point within the next couple of years. Those demands are all there to keep up and sustain what we have. Another thing that we do that I don't want to say is kind of a trick, but it helps to balance the budget is a lot of times when we create new positions, we fund them for a percentage of the year, often half of the year. And so what happens is the following year becomes that balloon payment, right? We have to find the rest of that position's salary and benefits, and we kind of do that on a whim, that hoping that we'll find that money. And this year it happened to be a little bit bigger because we had the fire inspector position that we budgeted for a percentage of the year, the community services coordinator position, a library position, and then the assistant director of public works, which was a little bit lesser for that one because that's mostly on the utility side. But again, all of those positions were budgeted for a percentage of the year. We had to pick up those costs in this draft budget for full year. Another thing that we do for expenditures is we kind of have this kind of roller coaster effect in elections. So 2023, God willing, we have one election in April, and that's it. And then in 2024, we turn around and we have a presidential election year, which we may have up to 4 elections that year. So the budget has been reduced for 2023 by about $40,000 in the elections budget. Again, we turn around and in 2024, we got to find that money again. The fire and EMS costs last year and this year, they put forward double-digit % increases to the municipalities. I don't think this has come up as a discussion with the village, but with that kind of percentage increase, it brings up actually one of the more uncommon uses of a levy limit exemption. So there is a levy limit exemption that if you are in a joint fire and EMS district, that if you only levy up to a certain percentage of the total assessed charges that the district has to the municipalities, you can exempt that amount of levy and basically take it off your concern of the limit. So that exemption is 9.7% this year. The district put forward, I think it was a 10%, 11% increase in their assessed charges. So if we were able to get to that 9.7, we could exempt all of that new levy that we would have to take on and just take it right off the books. And I think that would free up about $60,000 or $70,000 that we could use elsewhere, and that would take off our the amount that we're using from the fund balance for sure, and then at least a good portion of the rental income that it's going to disappear here in 18 months. So that's something to think about. Another thing that we do that is probably not overly sustainable is we budget percentages of employee salaries and benefits to some of the TIF districts and some special revenue funds. I want to say there's maybe like $60,000 or $70,000 in salaries and benefits across all of those funds. If we closed a TID or a special revenue fund couldn't support it for some reason, that money has to come back into the general fund. Of course, we have to find that. And then the big thing that is kind of blowing everything apart is overall inflation. Salaries is where we're really feeling the impact this year, but it's going to be a couple of years here before we start to see this ripple through all of the different industries that we deal with, and to start to see an actual trend of normalcy that we can budget for. And I think in particular, one thing that we're going to keep getting hit on for the next couple of years is our contracted services, where our assessor, our IT services, our insurances, our auditors, they're seeing all these pressures too, and when their agreements are up, they're going to come to us with newer amounts, and we're going to have to take those little hits every year. Same thing with utility costs, electric, gas, that's going to come. Our own utilities, we have to pay our utilities. For water and sewer, we're looking at potential increases there as well. So those hits are going to keep coming for the next couple of years as that ripples through. And then on the last thing on the expenditure side, with how tight everything has gotten and sort of the deficits that we're seeing, it just takes away our ability to do smaller budgetary projects. We funded the compensation study out of the general fund. We have the DEI training as a continuing appropriation in the general fund. If we are so tight, there's just not going to be any slack to do those types of things moving forward. So other challenges on the horizon and not so distant horizon that we need to be thinking about as we think about expenditures and revenues, not just for this budget, but beyond. Our buildings. So new library, new village hall, maintaining this property in a dormant state, maintaining the current library in a dormant state, maintaining the condition of the current senior center. We don't know what it's going to take to maintain these buildings. I mean, we're adding 2 new buildings here. What are those costs going to look like? They're larger. It's going to take a couple of years before we start to see a trend in those operational costs and how we're going to account for that. In terms of the fire district, these next two are kind of similar with the fire district and senior center. The fire district, we're continuing to grow as a village. Towns are not growing. Our share of the pie just keeps getting bigger and bigger. So not only is it, we're getting our percentage, but we're getting a higher percentage each year because we're growing in population and assessed value. And something to think about as a board is long-term is that we provide 65% of the district's funding, but we only hold 40% of the representation on the commission. For the senior center, it's similar. Again, our pie is increasing. You saw that actually at the joint meeting with Rachel's presentation. For 2023, the proposed budget, we're providing about $9,000 more to the senior center this year. The 2 towns are providing less because their share of the pie shrunk. So again, that's something that we're going to have to contend with as we go forward. The other big unknown that's out there is the town of Oregon. We're getting indications that they don't want to pay the calculated share of services under the current agreement anymore. They want to pay a flat rate. So how much is that flat rate? And how much can we support with that? Do we have to reduce? Do we have to find other revenues? Do we have to restructure how we deliver services in the senior center to the towns? And so that's a conversation we're going to have very soon. These next 2 are pretty similar. Again, parks, we're adding a lot of park acreage when we do these new subdivisions. Autumn Ridge with Dish Park, future phases of Autumn Ridge will need additional parkland. Highlands of Netherwood was a recent one. The Viridian neighborhood is proposing 2 parks. We have the Hermson property out by Highlands that will eventually come into the village, and that'll be 60 acres of parkland. So we're adding a lot of parks, and we're adding a lot of amenities to those parks that we haven't historically done. And so when we have things like ball fields, pickleball courts, playgrounds, not only is it more to maintain, more time to maintain all of these things, but they're becoming more sophisticated too. There's more different levels of sophistication that goes into handling ball fields and handling different types of playground equipment. Streets and stormwater is sort of the same thing with the parks. We're adding subdivisions, new lane miles of streets, curb gutters, trails, sidewalks, stormwater infrastructure, maintenance, snow plowing, mowing, equipment repair, staff time. All these things are increasing, and our staff, again, remains the same. Recreation stuff. We don't have a recreation department. The village hasn't historically done that. I know there's been some talk in recent years of doing those things. Again, when we have all of these things compounding on each other, how do we create something like that from scratch? The municipal court, we have a joint court with the town. It's not a big percentage of our expenditures, but we are the only ones that contribute to that. So under the current agreement, it's basically there for the town whenever they want to use it. The rates that were set for use of that were set in 1997. If they send a citation to us, they give us $25. If it goes to trial, they give us $10. They also haven't used the court in 7 years, going on 8 years. So when we think about that kind of arrangement, is that still acceptable to the village, or does something need to change there? And I think when we think about some of our other services like police services, fire, EMS services, our library, our senior center, we pay an amount to those services through our property taxes, because then they'll be there when we need them. And certainly with the utilities, it's the same way. There's a base charge that everybody pays, so that when you turn the tap on, all of that infrastructure that's behind what's allowing you to do that is still being maintained. And so again, the municipal court we're maintaining on behalf of the town, essentially. We talked about sick leave again. Post-employment liabilities. There's been some discussion of what if we we brought back that benefit, and depending on what that looks like, if we bring 60, 70 full-time employees onto some post-employment benefit, depending on what that looks like, we might immediately create a multi-million-dollar unfunded liability, basically, where we're having to come up with $100,000 plus for one retirement a year. So that's something that we need to think about as well. And then the cable TV franchise fund. That fund will be running on a deficit this year, and so it will be using its fund balance to cover the costs. So OCA Media is paid for out of there. There's a couple other costs that come out of there as well. Basically what's happening in that fund is the revenue that comes in, which is state aids and cable franchise fees, they're basically at the highest that they're going to be. They're going to stay there or most likely go down. And so with the contribution of where it's at for OCA Media, plus some of the smaller costs we run out of there, we're now at a deficit. We're using fund balance. What are we going to do when that fund balance runs out? And that will mean OCA Media will get put into the general fund and have to compete with dollars for all the services that are down this aisle here.
Can I just add something there, though? I'm on the OCA Media Board, and they've been taking steps to get sponsorships to run more like a PBS model, where, businesses pay money to sponsor certain programs, but also we are accepting donations. We're a 501c3, so we're trying to not have to rely on it because we know they're going to decrease. So we're working on that just to mitigate it a tiny bit after all this bad news. I'm just saying that may be less of an issue than all these other things.
Yep.
That's
yeah,
all.
and these horizon issues, these are things that we need to kind of get into our brains and start to kind of figure some of these things out. And I'm glad to hear that OCA Media is thinking about those things. And then the last few things here, just putting it in context with some of the other impacts that we have going on. We've talked about debt service ad nauseum during the CIP, but again, we're looking at that tax rate doubling. We're looking at our utilities needing some rate increases to support the CIP and ongoing operations. So again, that all kind of goes into that menu of services that we provide to our residents and what the impact is looking like. And then just zooming out, a couple thoughts I have in here, when we take all of these things into consideration and think about them. The 30,000 foot view, we kind of have a fundamental issue within our own tax base that creates some of these issues from our property tax levy limit. We're predominantly single family housing. most of our growth is from single-family housing. So single-family houses don't create a ton of value, and they create that value over a large geographic area with a lot of infrastructure that needs to support it. So we have, you know, an inefficient tax base that demands more municipal services because they're residents and they want services. And so compared to something like a business property, which can generate, you know, multi-millions of dollars of value within a very small geographic area, it generally requires less service demands from the municipality. We just don't have that diversification. And some of the you know, future land use growth areas that we have targeted with the southeast expansion area, and then the Keller land, which is west of Lycon. Those are privately owned lands, and if those private owners are not willing to participate in the development process or are working on a different timeline than we might be working on, you know, those things may not develop for several years. And short of the village buying the property and being the developer, you know, we may not be able to rely on those things happening for several years. But again, you know, going that route, you know, creates a whole host of other issues in terms of risk, and we also know where our debt service is right now. So the ability to do something like that is most likely going to be very challenging. So I think, you know, in the short term, over the next couple of years, as the village has done, and done a pretty good job, I think, we need to focus on infill redevelopment opportunities, and when those opportunities come up, we need to jump on them, and that likely means a commitment to public investment. You know, we've done a good job in terms of, you think about Gorman, Ticey, the hotel, Rosewood Apartments, Prairie Brook, Jefferson Crossing, recently Adam Coyle out on North Main. You know, finding those little opportunities and generating a lot of taxable value within those areas. So when we think about some of the opportunities that might be in front of us in terms of this property, Village Hall, Senior Center, the current library, the post office, we need to be thinking about all of these compounding issues that are happening, and we need to be thinking about, are we going to be exacerbating these issues, or are we going to alleviate these issues? Certainly, you know, these two properties, I think North Point out in Oregon Parks is another good example that we're sort of working through right now. I think you need to think about this in terms of 249 North Main Street as well. I mean, these opportunities come up very rarely, and again, you need to think about, are you going to exacerbate these issues that are occurring, or are you going to try to alleviate them? And so those are things to think about as we move forward year after year here. In terms of impacts to existing services, again, all these issues compounded. You know, we certainly have employees that are stretching themselves too far. You know, the ability to schedule vacations, the ability to give focus to work product because of an overabundance of work, the ability to take on new and complete special projects, delayed follow-up communications, just the overall lack of ability to be proactive rather than reactive. Essentially what we're operating under is keeping our head above water. So what is the crisis that's hitting us right now? We need to address that. If it's not a crisis, it's moving to the bottom of the list. And what is, you know, we know what that looks like. It looks like out-of-date ordinances, out-of-date policies. You know, we see short staffing at, you know, the police department is a good example, but we've seen that at the library this year as well. Projects move slowly. There's a reluctance to take on new projects. Deferred maintenance, and we've certainly seen that in the CIP. So all these issues have trickle-down effects and real-world impacts on how things operate. So in terms of options, you know, it really comes down to two things. It's controlling expenditures or finding revenue. And in terms of the expenditure side, I'm sure that if you go down this row, you know, we could find $500 here, $1,000 there. But when you look at all of these things compounded, we're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars that we need to find. And on the expenditure side, the only way that we can do that is through employee costs. So either reducing salary increases, cutting positions entirely, or significantly reducing staff hours. And so again, that turns back into what I just talked about with impacts to existing services. You remove people, people can't deliver those services. On the revenue side, there's a couple procedurally simple things that can be done, not necessarily politically simple. But the wheel tax is an option. That is a pretty straightforward one. That is collected at the DMV when you go to register your vehicle. And so if you register it in the Village of Oregon, they collect that and then they send us the money. So, you know, conservatively, if there's 5,000 vehicles registered in the Village of Oregon against a $20 wheel tax, that gets us $100,000. Streetlight user fee, this was something that Dave had mentioned when he was doing the financial management plan presentation. This is something that we can offload onto utility bills. Right now we have about $140,000 in electricity costs for streetlights. We can offload that from the general fund, put it on people's utility bills, saves about $140,000 on the general fund side. There's a little work in doing some ordinances and structuring the rates, but again, that's a pretty straightforward option to generate some revenue. So those two taken together, you know, generating upwards of $300,000 in revenue, that gets us maybe to getting some of these unsustainable revenues off the revenue side. Might help us with some expenditures on that side of things as well. There's some long-range options too. We can create utilities for different services. You know, stormwater utilities are pretty common. The only challenge with this is the state legislature closed a lot of those loopholes. So if we create, for example, a stormwater utility, however much tax levy we were using to support that service has to be decreased. So we have to make a negative adjustment on our tax levy to pull that out of the general fund and put it into its own utility to collect user rates on the utility bill. So basically, it's net zero for the first year, and then over time, you know, we don't have to put new general tax levy towards it. So over time, there's a savings 5, 10, 15 years down the road when it kind of aggregates to a higher amount. But, you know, that is an option. It takes quite a bit of work to set up a utility, but it can be done, and if we're looking at a long-term horizon, that may be an option. Last resort, and maybe not so last resort, is a levy limit referendum. So we can go to the people and have a referendum to ask to increase the levy limit. You hear about this more on the school district side, and of course, Oregon School District has one on the November ballot. Municipal referendums are uncommon, but they're becoming more common, and the city of Middleton is a great example. They just authorized a referendum for additional staff and employee wages, which is of course the big thing that's hurting us here. If we're thinking about a levy limit referendum, you know, the soonest we could do that would be April now. So that's something we would have to decide on pretty quickly. If we decide to go the route of wheel tax, streetlight user fee, those can be put into place relatively quickly. I think if nothing changes at the state level, in terms of levy limits and state aids. I think those two options buy us a couple of years until we have to do a levy limit referendum. So as I said, you know, we're kind of at that place where, you know, some of the doomsday stuff is becoming a reality, and we're gonna have to make some decisions here within the next 6 to 12 months to resolve this. And if we don't, then we're gonna be at the 2024 budget, and we're gonna have to cut a lot out of it. And would potentially start the budget before we even talk about employee salaries or anything at a $200,000 deficit. So we need to kind of control our own destiny here. So, with that, discussion or questions?
Martin, so I just want to say, I mean, I read your report. I appreciate your report being very honest, and I think this is my 5th budget. I don't think I've ever read a budget that I kind of finished with kind of being a little scared. When we got the email, I was optimistically hopeful that we're going to be okay, but I just wrote down some things as I was reading through it, and just things like alarming, sobering. I have debt with 2 exclamation points. I wrote down financial cliff, and I have 3 exclamation points for that. Current path unsustainable. Business growth is limited. 2024 $200,000 deficit. And I guess I just want to say we got some work to do, and this is a scary one. So that's it.
Mike?
Yeah, we're not alone in this. It's got to be every community in the state right now is looking down this same thing. The levy limit is frankly doing what it was designed to do, which is to choke local government, and it's doing that. I think, I mean, given the structural design of the levy limit, whatever we do is a temporary fix, and we'll be back at it again a few years down the line, because it doesn't take into effect inflation. So my goal would be to address this as soon as possible, the shortcomings, and see, because the impact on us will get worse the longer we defer it. So I don't believe April's a good time to put a levy limit referendum on the ballot. It's an off-year election. It's on the tail of the school district doing something. We would be better to set the political groundwork for any sort of levy limit referendum a year from now as opposed to next year. And certainly in the short run, to me, putting a wheel tax, looking at that, and street light user fees to tide us over is, should be on the plate when we're done with the budget. I think approaching or looking at the fire EMS district to see whether or not we can get the levy limit exemption from them, if there's some things that can be deferred to next year, would be appropriate. I think the stuff that Elise, that you're going to be bringing to the board on affordable housing and zoning changes, some of that deals with density and changing the density formulas for how much multifamily housing that we build, and starting to require more of that. I think those zoning limit changes will help us long-term. I think it's also something the Sustainability Committee will be pushing when it comes to the table next summer. I think that those will help us keep costs down. And lastly, I wanted to ask you, just curiously, I know we don't want to fund day-to-day budget on a loan. But what's the limitation on taking a loan out for a year and funding our budget and paying it off in a year?
Yeah, you can do that. I know, some towns have resorted to doing that. If it can be avoided, I would avoid it just because of interest costs and administrative overhead on getting those loans. I don't think we need to do that this year. I mean, as long as we have a plan to do something within the next 6 months, I would be comfortable with this budget being approved as it is, even with, some of the untenable revenues that we have. But as long as we're going to commit to doing something, so that we're ready for the 2024 budget, at not such a disadvantage, then I think we'll be in a good place. I mean, if we do to tack onto you, if we do the wheel tax and the streetlight user fee, I think that buys us 2 years until a levy limit referendum. There's not a November election next year, so we would have to wait till 2024. So that might be the path, is we do those two, kind of clean up some of these flagrant issues that are in front of us, and then if nothing changes at the state level or elsewhere, then we might be planning for that referendum. Last year when I got to the village, I was thinking we were probably about 3 to 5 years away from this conversation, but with inflation, it's blown everything apart. And I think to a certain degree, every municipality was always about 3 to 5 years away from the conversation. And, you're starting to see, the city of Middleton is going ahead with it, and you're starting to hear it more often. And I think, again, if nothing changes, that's where we need to be as well.
Can
Carly?
I, are you ready? I don't know.
He's got it.
You seem lost.
No, I'm shocked.
I agree with Mike on almost everything he said. I don't think that, I think next April will actually be a pretty high turnout election because it will be a Supreme Court race. There'll probably be 2 elections next year because there are 3 candidates who are declared, so there'll be a primary and then the Supreme Court election. I do like the idea of the wheel tax and the street light user fee, and would prefer not to have to go to referendum. I would hope, and I imagine this is true because I do scan the League of Municipalities emails. We have a $6 billion surplus as a state, and I completely agree with Mike that the state legislature has success, and so I just got to put that out there. We've got to be lobbying hard as individual officials and through the League of Municipalities to the state legislature to free up that money for the public good. And we as you as staff and we as board members are here to serve the public good, and it doesn't do us a damn bit of good to have $6 billion sitting in a rainy day fund that's not doing us any good.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm just gonna go ahead.
Here.
So, no, I'd like to say I completely agree with Mike on this. I think, and not that I necessarily disagree with Carleen, but I think this needs to be done incrementally. I think we do need to look at the wheel tax and the street utilities fee. The reason I say that I would rather Band-Aid this for a little bit rather than going straight to a referendum at the next election is the people on the bottom end of the scale in this village are going to feel this the most. So the seniors in the affordable housing units, the people on the lower end of the income spectrum are going to feel that wheel tax and that street light user fee. And I'd like to give them at least a chance or an opportunity to catch up with any sort of levy limit increase. So that's where I sit on this. Like I say, just echo my agreement with Mike on how to approach this.
Just to clarify, I'm not suggesting we go to referendum next April, just that it will be a big election.
Understood.
Go ahead, Mike.
Martin,
Sorry.
am I correct in when I look at how quickly our general fund disappears, that we're basically looking at about $1.5 million hole every year?
Yeah, I think it ramps up as we go. I think what Ellers showed was within 5 years, it's completely gone. So it's, a little bit the first year, and then it just keeps going. We have, what, 2.6 million in, almost 2.6 million in fund balance in there, so it will go rapidly. If it's projected to evaporate like that, it'll happen quickly.
Okay, but not as bad as I had assumed. But either way, the wheel tax and the light user fee will not fill that hole completely.
I think it gets us off of having to use the fund balance in the most immediate future, probably for 2, maybe 3 years. It gets the post office income off, so we don't have to rely on that, and the expenditure restraint, we don't have to rely on that as well. So it gets rid of kind of the most flagrant, unsustainable things that we have going on right now, fills that, and then we can, next year we can, we'll see what our levy limit is next year. We're obviously growing. It'll probably be around something similar to this. We may be kind of in a similar position as where we are right now, but we'll have those two things in place, and then we can start planning for potentially a referendum in 2024. Amanda?
Yeah, I'm wondering, in just your best guess here, like how close are we to getting that East Side Business Park going?
The last conversation Elise and I had with them, it's just not a priority for the family right now. They do other developments, and they're focused out on the East Coast right now. They have a couple out there that they have going on. For them, it's that project just isn't on their priority list. They've told us that if we get prospects, we can send them their way, and they'll consider them. But I would expect that we may be several years until that develops, unless there's something that we, if we offer to buy the land and be the developer, or we offer something significant in terms of financial incentive to make it a priority. So I think that's the reality there. I think it will go someday, but not for several years.
I was just wondering if maybe we could tell them about this fiscal cliff we got going on here. Maybe they might be willing to work with us a little faster. I don't know. But
Jenna?
So I want to make sure I'm understanding, because from your presentation, what you have here, and understanding what's going on or what isn't going on at the state level, it seems that what really has been happening is that we've been pushed more and more to take on more debt versus cash flowing our operations. And so in thinking about that, I guess I'm curious, I think we should put all options on the table. So, getting some, so you had estimates in the wheel tax. I don't know how firm those numbers are. Same with the streetlight thing, how much it would cost for a referendum, because there's a cost to put that on. I think we should analyze that. But I also think we should look at what the impact would be to borrow to purchase that land. Because I think, we're looking at increasing revenues either way, but at least in purchasing that land, we can then sell it off in smaller chunks to businesses and developers. So I think we should include that as part of our analysis, since we can take on debt for that purpose. Not saying I'm thrilled at the idea of any of them, but I think if we're gonna look at this, we should look at every option on the table. Oh,
I have-
Elise?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, just one quick note and thought about the business park. It's not for lack of opportunities, lack of businesses that would be a good fit, that we would, be potentially a good location for. It's having all of the, most businesses that want to come in, they want to build within, 6 months. And so the fact that the land hasn't been annexed, it hasn't been brought into our comp plan, it doesn't have the infrastructure underground to provide water, sewer, all those things. Those are all the investments that really, have to be in place, or you have another partner in place that helps fund a lot of that, that we would be able to go, but we're not at that point where we can really entertain any offers because we have so many steps to go before it's really ready to build.
And we've been talking about this for 10 years, jumping over 14.
Oh, longer
Or
than
was
that.
it, is it longer?
30 years.
30 years,
Yeah,
wow, I
and
didn't think it was that
It
long.
goes way back, you find it
Okay.
in
Wow.
old Oregon
Yeah.
servers and stuff like that.
Amanda?
Yeah, and I'm not trying to start a discussion on this or anything, it's merely a question. If the property at 249 North Main were to be sold, or let's say we got $1 million or whatever we paid for it, where would that money go? That wouldn't go to the general fund, right? That would.
It would go to TID 5.
TID 5.
Yes, so
Okay.
if we got money for the sale, that would go into TID 5. The taxable value, the construction value created as part of a development would increase the levy by whatever the value was. So that's the only way we can raise the levy, so we get that construction value. And then we actually get to take it again when the TID closes, so we actually get to take the hit twice. So that would be a benefit.
But the taxable value, not like, that money doesn't just go somewhere where we can spend it. It goes into something that would be beneficial down the road, but.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, Jenna?
Just to piggyback off your comment, have we received an actual estimate on how much we could potentially sell that land for? And have I just forgotten that?
There was in 2003, the church did an appraisal. And back then, they determined that the highest and best use for the property was low to moderate residential. And that would make the land potentially worth $600,000.
So that's almost 20 years old now?
Right.
Yeah, okay. So we don't have anything other than that?
No, it's not assessed now because it's a public property.
Right, right. I just didn't know if in the conversations that has been part of our analysis too, is having somebody look at what the value is of that land.
Isn't that part of what Vanderwall is doing? Or, because they're,
No, you would need to have a certified property appraiser do that work for you to get a good number.
okay.
All right, Martin, where do you want to go from here?
I can kind of quickly breeze through some of these other pieces, just to kind of get through them, and then we could pick up at the next meeting. A lot of this stuff is kind of things that we've talked about through the CIP. But the next couple of pages after the last piece we talked about is just the budget summaries for all the different funds. So if you don't want to get into the accounting worksheets with all the line items, you can just see the bottom line for all of those. And again, with the general fund, you can see that we've created this challenge even though we've only raised our expenditures by 1.2%. So that just gives you an idea of the impact of just even a small increase in the challenges it creates. But you can see just in the overall, the general government is down -12%. I'm guessing that's because we had a transfer in there last year and we don't this year. But you can see pretty reasonable increases for public safety, public works, health and human services, which is mostly the senior center, and then a little decrease in culture and recreation, and then Elise is just spending the farm apparently at 63%, but that's the community services coordinator position that's getting budgeted for a full year. But in terms of piece of the pie, you can see that's a pretty relatively small piece of the overall pie. And again, the budget summaries for all the different funds. I'm going to scoot ahead to, and then after that, I have a piece in here on the projected fund balances based on projected revenues and expenditures. So you can kind of see where all the different funds are at in terms of money. Factors influencing the 2023 operational budgets. We've talked about most of these. I've covered most of them. I'll just breeze through some of these quickly. As I mentioned, we put this placeholder of 3% across the board in for non-union, which is basically every government employee except for the police officers. Again, we'll see what the compensation plan looks like. We're going to have to kind of plug and play with what we want to do there, but again, it's probably going to be a multi-year phase-in, but at least we have a plan going forward. I believe we have a tentative agreement with the police union. I believe that contract will be coming to the board next meeting. But as we looked at previously, we're changing the structure of the police officers' compensation. So they're going to be receiving more variable adjustments depending on their length of service. But the overall salary increase in the operational wage line item there is 8%. But again, you'll see some officers will get a little bit smaller increases, and some will get some bigger increases as we try to tinker with the wage structure there to get employees up to more competitive salaries. On the benefits side, again, some of those inflationary hits will kind of keep rolling at us. Health insurance premiums up 5% for the employer's contribution. WRS contributions for the employer up slightly for general employees, 1.5% for law enforcement employees. Workers' compensation and premiums have risen slightly. We talked about shared revenues and how flat they are and will continue to be flat. The one number we don't have yet is general transportation aids, but we expect that will be pretty similar to what we had last year. I talked about the expenditure restraint funds and the challenge of putting that back into the general fund revenue. Rental income from the post office, we talked about elections and the wave of expenditures that occur from year to year there. We talked about some of the fire district things. One good thing that is in this budget is we hired a new janitor custodian position this year. That actually is producing an overall net savings because the contracted services we had were just coming out of control from a cost standpoint. So that is a positive. I talked about new positions moving to full year that we budgeted for last year, and then kind of coming up with that balloon payment of funding for full year. Another good thing in this budget is we did some tinkering around with the room tax this year. We worked with the Tourism Commission to, instead of providing funding for the chamber through the general fund, providing that through room tax dollars instead. So we've been able to take that amount off the general fund, and we're also going to use the village's portion of the room tax as a general purpose revenue in the general fund, because that is a pretty consistent revenue that we can rely on. We've estimated it conservatively, but we'd like to use that moving forward as a general fund revenue, and the net positive for the general fund there was $26,000, so that was a good thing. And then we've talked about inflation a number of times in a number of ways. In terms of strategic priorities, so of course we have the strategic plan that the Village Board adopted last year. We were able to get a number of things done in that already. We're underway with a few other things. The 2023 budget includes funds for advancing some of those priorities and objectives. We'll continue to do our financial management work, which I think has produced a lot of good things for us to understand where we're at especially where we're at right now. As Mike mentioned about rewriting some of the zoning ordinance changes, we always have some funding for planning consultant work in there. So we should be able to move forward with rewriting some of those things. We have the $20,000 in continuing appropriations for the DEI training. That sounds like we're getting closer to doing. We still do have $75,000 in continuing appropriations to do work on the southeast expansion. So if things do come up where we have some money there that we can spend. And then the rest are all CIP related. $90,000 for the comprehensive plan update, $30,000 for the parks plan update, final borrowing for the library project, $200,000 for early planning work on the senior center project, $2.5 million for JC Park, and then some $725,000 to do the planning and design work for the wastewater treatment plant project, which will probably be the most expensive project in village history. So we're moving forward on all of those things, which are all in the strategic plan. The CIP, I'll breeze through this really quick too. We've gone over this a number of times over the last couple of months. You can see some of the descriptions for the different funds we have for capital funds and how we account for those different things. There's one change that we have from the CIP plan that Chief Pagan Cuff submitted, and that was related to the sprinkler system at the police department. We had a $34,000 cost in 2026 to replace all of that. But I understand she got an inspection for the building, and it's become more timely to do that project. And there's a desire to do that next year at an increased cost of $38,000 instead of $34,000. So we'll put that in the budget unless the board feels differently, and we'll plan to have that as part of the borrowing next year. CIP plan is in there. We've seen this a lot. The 2023 projects are all being budgeted for, and so that you can see that reflected in the accounting worksheets here, which are the line items. And we'll just go through this, unless there's any questions on any of the CIP. And then debt service, this one's pretty straightforward as well. We obviously have to make our debt payments. So you can see the accounting worksheets that reflect all the debt service payments that we have and all of the abatements that we have from utilities contributing to some of those, as well as some impact fees we put towards some of those. I do have a couple of worksheets in here from Eller's financial management plan, just so we can kind of be refreshed on what the capital plan looks like in terms of borrowing sizes moving forward. And we're looking at about a $9.5 million borrowing next year, and you can kind of see that moving forward over the next few years. We've seen this table many times as well. This shows that doubling of the debt service tax rate and the impact on a $320,000 home. You can see the debt limit calculation. We've seen this a number of times. I think maybe the difference here than we've seen it in the past is we are just barely underneath that 70% mark at the highest point in 2027. So when we do think about things like, if we're thinking about developing a business park or purchasing land towards a business park, this is the table that we need to be thinking about in terms of how close is that going to make us towards our debt limit? What are we comfortable with in terms of emergency planning and that sort of thing? So if we're looking at multi-millions of dollars, you're going to see this line keep bumping up. You can see the tax levy and tax rate seen a different way than what you saw in this worksheet. Basically the TID levy support, existing debt, new debt, and then that tax rate reflection on the far right there. And then again, the the accounting worksheets with all the different line items, which takes all those numbers and then puts it into the line item budget. And the TID debt service funds are also in this spot as well. Any questions on debt service? We talked about that quite a bit. All right, and then I'll just breeze through the general fund here. Again, you have all the stuff in the packet. You definitely don't need to discuss or come up with questions tonight. We can take it up at the next meeting as well. But we've talked about taxes, intergovernmental revenues, our state aids. That makes up 85% of our revenue for our general fund. The rest of the 15% comes from license and permits, fines, public charges, intergovernmental charges, and then miscellaneous revenues that we bring in and other financing sources, mostly transfers under that category. So you can see how all that translates into the accounting worksheets. Then on the expenditure side, again, as I kind of mentioned, there's nothing that's really surprising in the general fund side. The big expense here is salary and benefits. That makes up the bulk of the expenditures. For the operating expenses in terms of, supplies, fuel, vehicle expenses, maintenance. Again, with 20 years of expenditure restraint, those are pretty cut down to the bone. There's not a lot of fat there to trim anymore, and we're just trying to anticipate where some of these inflationary costs might hit us. But in terms of expenditures, here's a great picture of Matt that I wanted to get in there. Again, we've some of the highlights we've already talked about, or lowlights. The elections budget is kind of one of the big things that you'll see in there. If you go line by line, you'll see that savings from the custodian position and some of the negative adjustments in some of these line items. And then we've talked about some of the continuing appropriations and lack of contingency and budgeting fund balance to balance the budget. On the public safety side, the big thing there is salaries, again, with the union contract. Chief Hagenkoff put together a nice explanation of increases and decreases by line item, so you can see where everything is hitting there. We've talked about the fire protection budget. We had the joint meeting last week as well. And then a couple of other public safety items there, with inspections, emergency government, crossing guards. Nothing too surprising there. Public Works, I would say the same thing. There's nothing overly noteworthy. Again, the bulk being salaries and benefits. We are proposing to increase the boot allowance for the guys and gals, though, from $150 to $250 a year, just to keep up with where the price of really everything is. And then the other sub funds with engineering, machinery repair, garage, snow and ice control. Again, we're trying to anticipate inflation where we can. Traffic signals, you'll see going up a little bit. We're taking on more traffic signals over the last few years. We'll take on a new one this year. So again, electricity repairs. Street lighting, we talked about how we can offload that expense. But again, with more subdivisions and more street lighting, those expenditures kind of slowly tick up as well. Storm sewer, trees, brush, and leaves, nothing overly surprising there as well. Moving on to Health and Human Services, the cemetery. We had the joint meeting last week regarding the senior center, so Rachel did a good job explaining her budget. Again, I think it's pretty consistent with the other budgets in terms of there's not really anything that's overly surprising or anything that's new. She did hit on the one thing of the request to increase the adult daycare program staff from 21 hours to 24 hours, which is a marginal $5,000, $6,000 increase. But as we know from Rachel's presentation the other night, the program actually made money last year, so that's a good thing. And animal control, that's my dog, Matilda. She's now part of the permanent record of the village. Culture and recreation, we don't have a whole lot of expenditures here. Some of the senior center expenditures are in this subcategory, which Rachel did a great job of explaining at the joint meeting. Our parks costs, and then our recreation cost, we put the community services coordinator position in this budget this year. So that's why you'll see a big hit in that budget. I'm sorry, we took it out of the recreation budget and put it into the planning budget to reflect the reporting structure for that position. And so that's where you'll see the big increases under planning. Economic development, again, I mentioned the room tax stuff. You'll see the $8,000 decrease there. And then other financing uses, again, that's where transfers usually show up. So then the next handful of pages is the accounting worksheets reflecting all of that. I think that brings us to where I wanted to stop tonight. Yes, so we'll pick up with special revenue, funds, utilities, TIDs next time around. All that information is in the packet, so you can review that over the next couple of weeks. You can review everything we've gone over tonight. If you think of anything, feel free to email or give me a call as well. You can email or call any of the department heads if you have specific questions, or you can bring them up at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. All right, can we go to 9B, future agenda items? Item gives board members opportunity to place items on and new business on a future agenda for discussion. Anybody? Amanda's got something?
Well, I'm just asking the question, did we already agree to get the presentations for the October 7th, no, November meetings?
November 14th.
Okay.
So I have Vandewall's presentation, discussion only
Yep.
for October 17th.
Mm-hmm.
October 7th.
And then planned for November 14th as potential community group presentations.
Okay. So if that's done, then I don't have anything. I
good.
just wanted
Okay.
to make sure that we got it.
Yep.
So-
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay. Let's go on to
We may have something from DEI. I won't know until after Thursday.
Okay, all right.
Randy?
Yeah, Mike?
We don't at this point have to schedule something for discussion of wheel tax and things like that. That's just gonna naturally come up
Yeah, I think we
after
could.
the budget, right?
Yeah, if we need to talk about some more, we'll have the budget item, and I think it's appropriate to talk about it under there. And then, once the budget is done, yeah, we'll start putting it on the agenda if that's what the board wants to do.
I just thought of something else,
Yeah.
I apologize. The Transportation Committee has found out about a possible grant that we could apply for planning to pay for those expenses. And I wasn't sure what the procedure is for, like, do we need to get village board approval for the committee to apply for that grant, or how does that work?
Typically, yeah.
So-
Is it a state grant or a public grant, or is it a private?
No, it's a public, it's through, our guest speaker, Ben Lyman.
Oh, the
from
MPO?
Cleveland. Yeah, the MPO, yeah, so they, it might be a state grant that they have a link on their website, and there's a guy that you email to talk to. We've emailed him and haven't heard anything for weeks, so I'm not sure how quickly this will happen, but if it does happen quickly, we'd like to apply. We were hoping by the end of the year,
Okay.
because then it would take effect the next year, in
Yeah,
2023, so.
typically, a lot of those grants will require like a resolution of approval from the board,
Okay,
as part of the application process, so.
so we should get the ducks in a row
Yeah.
and then let you know, and okay, so,
Yeah.
but that's in the future. I don't have anything concrete yet, so, okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, 10, report of village officers. 10A, village administrative report, that was in our packet from Martin. 10B, Village Department Head. Anybody? Yeah.
Yeah, I just
Jennifer?
want to let you know that we extended our bid deadline by 2 weeks. The construction market is still really, really busy, so we are hoping that's going to optimize the number of bidders that we have on the project and give them time to get the best possible numbers from their subs. So we're basically going to bring open bids 2 weeks later and then present them to you 2 weeks later at the October 17th meeting.
That was the other big item that's gonna be on this agenda, October 17th agenda.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Anybody? Elise or Rachel? Jeff? Okay. Are we getting signals soon, Jeff? Prairie Parkway?
They were supposed to be mid-September, but
Okay.
they're still at least a couple weeks out.
Okay. All right, Chief, anything? Lisa?
Just really quick,
Yeah.
Jeff, maybe I'll take your thunder here. Is the lead service line replacement project completed, other than restoring?
That announcement will come
Okay.
at a later date.
Okay.
I don't wanna steal some of Lauren's.
Okay, perfect.
All
thunder
right,
on that.
good. All right. We did 10C already. How about 11, announcements, miscellaneous business? Upcoming meetings and events, I think that was in our packet as well. So we're on the 12.
Can I say one more thing before?
You may.
So I just thought it was worth pointing out that in Municipality Magazine, on page 32, there is an appeal from the municipality's president to meet with legislators and walk them through budget challenges and make it clear that we need their help. It's on page 32, letter from him urging us to do that.
Thank you. All right, looking for adjournment. Amanda, second. All right, Derek. All right, all in favor, say aye. All right, we're done.
No nos?
No no's. You think there would be?
You don't actually need.
You were gonna say no, Mike?
It's like,
Hey, you don't have any- well, you better hurry.